All right, so picture this. You're in Times Square, right? And you're completely surrounded by those massive buildings that seem to, like, I don't know, almost touch the sky, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty awe-inspiring.
Totally. And that's exactly what we're diving into today, New York City architecture. But we're going beyond just like the famous skyscrapers and stuff.
Right, we're going deeper.
Exactly. We're going to uncover how like geography, history, even those zoning laws you hear about all shaped those iconic
It's
buildings.
a city where every inch seems planned, right?
Totally. And get this, we've got this incredible architectural encyclopedia all about New York City.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's packed with insights. So let's start with Manhattan. It's an island, obviously.
Which most people don't think about much.
Right. But that's like the key to understanding why skyscrapers are so synonymous with the city.
Yeah, think about it. Solid bedrock underneath. Perfect for those super tall structures. But then water all around, so you've got limited space.
So they had to build up.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Building vertically wasn't just a stylistic choice. It was about maximizing what they had.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So it wasn't just architects wanting to create a dramatic skyline.
Well, there's definitely an element of that. I mean, who wouldn't be inspired to reach for the sky with those views?
Right.
But it was also the most practical solution to a very real constraint.
I get it. So were people intimidated by those early skyscrapers? Or was it pure excitement at seeing the skyline transform so dramatically?
You know, our source actually talks about that. It seems those early skyscrapers were seen as symbols of ambition and progress, like America reaching for the stars, literally.
I love that. Reaching for the stars.
Of course, 9/11 cast a dark shadow on that, reminding everyone of the vulnerability of even the most imposing structures.
Yeah, a somber thought for sure. But what's amazing is how the city rebuilt and just kept reaching higher. That spirit of resilience is like part of New York's DNA. Now, we can't talk about New York without mentioning the other boroughs.
Right, it's so easy to get caught up in the Manhattan hype.
Totally. But there's so much more to explore.
Each borough has its own architectural personality, its own history. Take Brooklyn's Prospect Park, for example.
Okay, I love Prospect Park.
It was designed by the same people behind Central Park, Frederick Law Olmsted, and Calvert Vose.
No way. I had no idea. So if you love Central Park, Prospect Park is a must visit.
Definitely. And for a dose of history, you can actually find remnants of the World's Fairs in Queens Flushing Meadows Park.
Oh, wow, the World's Fairs. What a cool connection to the past. Okay, so we've talked about the lay of the land, but I'm ready to get into the architectural styles themselves.
Let's do it. It's like taking a time machine through different design
I
eras.
love it. Time machine it is.
Our source breaks New York architecture down into 5 main periods, starting with Beaux-Arts.
Beaux-Arts. Okay,
Yeah.
give me an example. What comes to mind?
Think grand, imposing structures like Columbia University, Grand Central Station. They were inspired by classical Roman architecture with all the emphasis on symmetry, ornate details, that sense of grandeur.
Those buildings aren't just beautiful, they're like a direct link to the past. Imagine all the history those walls have seen.
Absolutely. They ground the city in its history.
Yeah.
And from there, we move to the Art Deco period. That's when things get a bit more dazzling, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And when I think Art Deco, the Chrysler Building instantly pops into my head. Those sleek lines, the iconic spire.
Pure glamour.
Exactly. And here's something to look for. Those Art Deco details weren't just for skyscrapers. You'll find them on apartment buildings all over the intricate geometric patterns, those little flourishes around doorways.
It's like a citywide scavenger hunt. I love finding those hidden details.
They add so much character. And speaking of character, our next stop is Manhattan Modernism, the period that truly redefined the city's skyline.
Oh, yes. The Empire State Building.
Of course. But here's the thing, those setbacks you see, those step-back layers as the building rises. They weren't just an artistic choice. It was actually a direct result of the 1916 zoning law.
Wait, seriously, you mean those setbacks, which just look cool, were actually a response to regulations? Exactly. They had to get creative to build higher.
It's fascinating. It makes you wonder how many other design elements we perceive as purely aesthetic were actually driven by practicality.
That's the beauty of architecture, this constant dance between artistry and functionality. And that leads us nicely to the international style, which really embraced that connection between form and function.
So we're talking lots of glass and steel, clean lines. It's a very different feel from those more ornate earlier periods.
Exactly. And some great examples are the Seagram Building and Liver House.
They're both iconic, but so different when you think about it.
Right. The Seagram building, designed by Mies van der Rohe, is like this minimalist masterpiece.
Yeah.
Whereas Lever House, with its light and airy facade, almost seems to hover above the street.
I find it so interesting how architects working within the same style can still create such distinct buildings. It shows how this period was more about a shared design philosophy than a strict set of rules, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears and step into the world of alternative modernism.
Oh, here we go. This is where things get really interesting, right?
This is where buildings become like works of art themselves. Take the Guggenheim Museum, for instance.
Such a cool building.
Right. That spiraling form is as captivating as the art inside.
It's like the building itself is part of the art collection.
Exactly. And then you have the Whitney Museum of American Art, a complete contrast with its brutalist, angular design. It's a powerful statement, challenging traditional ideas about beauty in architecture.
So we've got two museums, both considered alternative, but completely different in their style. It's amazing how this period allowed architects to really break free from the mold.
And our source points out that museums are often at the forefront of these alternative movements, which makes sense when you think about it.
How so?
Well, museums are designed to challenge perspectives, to ignite conversations, just like art itself, and the buildings themselves can be a part of that.
That's so true. Museums as incubators for architectural innovation. I love that idea. But enough about the past. Ready to step into the present and explore the modern marvels shaping New York's skyline today.
Let's do it.
What's so cool about New York is that its architecture never sits still. It's a city that just keeps evolving, keeps pushing those boundaries.
Totally. Even in the 21st century, new additions to the skyline are popping up.
It's like they're constantly trying to outdo themselves.
Right. And a lot of those newer buildings, they're not just about looks, they're incorporating all these new technologies and sustainable design elements.
Right, like the Rose Center for Earth and Space at the American Museum of Natural History.
Oh yeah, that glass cube.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's a great example of how a building can be beautiful and educational.
Exactly. It's like they captured a piece of the cosmos and brought it down to Earth.
Which, when you think about it, is a pretty good summary of New York's architectural spirit as a whole.
Totally. So what do you think, what does the future hold for the city's skyline?
That's the big question, isn't it?
I mean, how much higher can they possibly go?
Who knows with technology these days? But it also makes you think about the buildings we've lost along the way. Our excerpt talks about the demolition of Penn Station back in '62.
Oh man, Penn Station. What a shame.
It was a grand old Beaux-Arts building, a real landmark.
I've only seen pictures, but it looked incredible.
They say it was a real loss for the city. And its demolition actually sparked a huge preservation movement.
Makes sense. People wanted to make sure they didn't lose any more architectural treasures.
Exactly. It raises the question, how do you balance preserving the past with making space for the future?
It's a tough one for sure, because on one hand, you don't want to lose those historic structures, those connections to the past.
Right, but then how can a city grow and adapt if it's frozen in time?
Exactly. It's like, where do you draw the line?
It's a debate that's still going on today, and not just in New York, in cities all over the world.
Totally. It's not just about the skyscrapers either. It's about the everyday buildings, the neighborhoods, the parks.
All the spaces that shape how we experience a city, each with its own history, its own story to tell.
I love that. Every brick has a story.
That's why it's so cool to pay attention to the architecture around us, even the stuff we might take for granted.
It's like once you start noticing these things, you can't unsee them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think whether you're into architecture or not, everyone can appreciate that.
Absolutely. So next time you're in a new city, or even just walking around your own neighborhood, take a moment to look around. You never know what you might discover.
After all, understanding a city's architecture is like understanding its soul. So yeah, next time you're out and about, take a second to really see the buildings around you.
I love that. It's like a little challenge.
Right. Look for those echoes of the past, like maybe some Art Deco details on an old movie theater, or the grandeur of a Beaux-Arts library.
It's amazing what you start to notice when you're actually paying attention.
Totally. And I bet you'll start to see your city in a whole new light.
It's like, you know how sometimes a certain building just makes you feel a certain way?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, does that super modern skyscraper make you feel energized or kind of insignificant? Does that old brick building with the fire escape make you think about the families who used to live there?
It's like buildings can evoke these emotions, you know.
Totally. They tell stories, even without words.
Exactly. Cities are like these giant, ever-changing museums They're full of stories, just waiting to be discovered.
That is such a great way to put it. So, to wrap things up, I guess what we're saying is next time you're exploring a new city or even just wandering around your own, take a moment to appreciate the architecture.
Yeah. You might be surprised at what it reveals about the people and the history that shaped that place.
And hey, you might even discover a new favorite spot you never noticed before.
There you go.
That's it for our deep dive into New York City architecture.
Hope you enjoyed it.
We had a blast geeking out with you all about those iconic buildings and the history behind them.
Until next time.